With this, we have successfully covered basic of routing. Now we're going to be seeing the auth card, and we will also try to make login page. Then we will define lazy loading and the other interesting topics of routing. So we have noticed that we are shuffling between these two routes, homes and student. But if you look at our application over here, let's just refresh this. So if we try to access that page directly, log in once again, let's just say have this page, refresh. You notice whenever we do a refresh, it takes us to the login page. And what if we try to type down the URL directly and try to enter this? We notice that the application page is not directly being opened. It is always being redirected to login page. We also notice the similar behavior happens with all the other production grade website. So whenever you need to log in, whenever you need to secure a route behind your login wall, in that case, we will have to do that setting also from the router, and that we will see now. So here in our application, if you notice, even if we try to copy this and do a refresh, it always loads it here in the students. But in your real world application may not really behave this way. So landing page must be or may be hidden behind security wall. And in that case, in order to reach to this place, a user must provide its credential. So that let's try to create login component, and we will see how do we do a settings in router config to a default redirect to login page whenever a user try to enter or try to open a page directly by copying the URL from the browser. We now have to create a guard. This is the auth guard. So let's just type in the command, which is, and the name of the guard is auth guard. Here you would notice that there are four distinct options we can create a guard of. So first is canActivate, the other one is canActivate child, the third is canDeactivate, and fourth is the canMatch. So let's just select this and deselect this. But before that, let's quickly go back to Chrome browser and have a look at the guard type and what Angular documentation has to say about it. There are essentially these four type of guard that it talks about. And in order to know the details of it, let's just click on this link over here and see the route object. Here in the route object, it's essentially the same object that we provide to a routers array in our config file. So let's just quickly go to VS Code and see what I'm talking about here is this one. If you notice here, we have provided three distinct path and the component to three distinct object in the routes array. The first one is the login component, the second is the landing, and third is the students. Here in the same array, we also need to provide the guard. So let's say can activate child, can deactivate, and can match. So these are the four distinct properties it has. So now quickly let's go back to Chrome browser and so can activate, can match, can activate child, and can deactivate. All of these fours are given over here, and all of these are optional, and that's why the object was still valid in the routes array. Can activate essentially means that it activates the component. If a user can activate essentially means that if a user has an activate right for a component. In case of can match, it says if a user has right to match for a route. In case of activate child, it means that a user has permission to activate a child on a particular route. Can deactivate means a user has right to can deactivate a component on a route. So these are the essential four type of routes that we have. Now let's quickly go back to VS Code and let's just choose can match and press enter. We'll take a moment and create the auth card over here. So as you can see now we have got the auth card. Let's just put it here. And also we have got the auth card spec, which we are going to be changing now. We're just going to be focusing on auth card TS per se. Let us now clean the console and also let's write the auth service. Auth service is a service which will hold the login information about a user, and this is going to be a global service. So in order to write such service, let's just do an import first, injectable, Mm, let's just start writing table decorator. Inside that, we are going to be providing an object and provided in as root. Why root? Because we are going to be putting this service at the global level because the same service will be used by all the components that we have in our application. Now, let's write a service which is auth service, your class. Now, let's create a property is logged in false. Let's make it type colon. Now, we are going to be creating a redirect URL. This URL, this property will hold the URL to navigate to in case if the user is found not to be authorized. Let's just click on the login. Just create a login function. It's going to be returning an observable type where write logic. There's going to be a service that we're not going to be integrating it with the backend. So in order to create the login, so whatever credential that you type in your login form, it'll always be setting it to true. But then both of them have to be mandatory. It has to be logged in at least. But in real world application, you will have to replace this login functionality with an actual API that you create. I just pipe this and make a delay of 1 second. Also, let's just step this in and also return as done with the login function. Let's create a logout function as well. And also let's just import observable rxjs, another thing from rxjs operator. So far so good. So in this service, what we have essentially created is just a class, and that service class has two property is logged in and redirect URL. This class will be used globally because this service auth service will be accessed by all the components in our application. Now let's just put this dependency in your root component, which is going to be in the app config.ts. Here in the app config.ts, let's just this as well and do an import. And this import the auth service. The auth service, let's just import this. Now we're good to go. What we've essentially done is that imported this auth service in the config and injected that at the root level because this app config is a config which is provided at the root of your application. If you look at it here, the main TS, the bootstrap application accepts two arguments as discussed earlier. First is the component, the root component where it needs to have. The other is the config. Config, it's going to be the list of all the providers that you want to be accessed centrally, which means access globally. In that case, first you need to provide a route. Second is provider or the service that you want to access globally. In our case, it is going to be auth service. So let's just close all of these Let's just open the route file here. Now here, let's just import, beg your pardon. Let us just import service. This the auth card needs to be provided in the. So what type of function have we created? We created canActivate, can match. Case of can match, just provide that as a card in an array because it accepts as an array. Now after this configuration, repeat it here for the next one. We've set up the guards here. However, there is another thing which is missing. That is, we haven't written any code for the guard. We've written a service. That service keeps a track of your logged in information, and that same service will be used in the auth card. And let's write the code for the auth card. So here, the thing to note here is that we're going to be making use of a function called inject. So this inject function is going to be storing two information. Say auth service. So this inject function comes from the Angular core. And then it needs to provide what exactly it needs to import. So as we had seen in the past that if you need to inject any dependency in your component, we, we were to do that in the constructor. However, whenever we are writing auth cards are usually triggered even before the component is rendered at the router level. So here in this case, in order to inject dependency in any of its guard, we will have to make use of inject function. So there are two dependencies we need to inject. The first one is the router, which is going to be from Angular router. The second is the auth service. The auth service is a locally created service. Let's just put this also. Yeah, it's clean. In the auth service, as let's just open that in parallel. The auth service is basically a service which holds two global properties: is logged in and redirect URL. Is logged in is a property that is set or unset the moment you log in or log out. So in case if you log in, it is set to true. When you log out, it is set to false. So in case if we need to have a login information, so here the if we need to have login information in the auth card, we need to understand whether the user has clicked login or not. In this case, we can simply come here and then simply come here and check auth service for the login information. So let's just write that code. Auth service dot is logged in. If it is logged in, then we want our user to. So let's just make another arrangement here. We want a spaces to be four in a tab. Okay. So auth card, auth service is logged in, then just log in. No problem with it. Just in case if you find that the user is has not logged in, so in that case, you're going to be returning the user to login component. create URL tree, and in that function now the user is logged in, then simply the user will be, initially we have set is logged in as false. And let's just go to the Chrome browser. We have okay. We see even if we click to home students, it always takes us to login component. The meaning, and let's just try to do one other change. Let's say, what if the login is always successful? Let's just make it as initially, and now go back and see in the Chrome browser if that works. Yep. Now we are able to access because initially we have set that is logged in as true. Now let's just go back to VS Code and make it false again. So far, what we have achieved is that we are able to create multiple routes. We are able to create auth cards. We have also seen all the four type of cards that we can create. We have also seen how different components are rendered and what are their properties. We have also seen how do we pass input and output arguments and things. We have also seen now what we're going to do is we're going to compare it with the application that we're going to be building eventually. So let's go back to Chrome again and see the application that we're trying to build. So if you see, log in like this, and if we log in, that's when the sidebar and the central panel appears, where we can navigate to multiple routes. Let's go back to home, and if we refresh, it takes us to a login page. This is a different entity altogether, right? So, and also bring it, let's just open this network tab and make it as all. Click on login. You may notice that there is an HTTP call being made to bring a module, which is the dashboard module. So initially when you load an application, your application is loaded alone. So it does not really have any other module other than the login component. Once you click on login, and that's when it downloads it and make an API call to display this. So basically we are now going to be implementing the lazy loading or the dashboard route, but by default only the first route, which is the login page would be enabled in your application. So how do we do that? Let's quickly go back to VS Code and start coding for it.